Welcome to Staffworks Explained. If you are here for the first time, please subscribe to this channel. Also watch other videos that you have done on various topics. Leave your comment and share. In today's video, we'll be talking about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Gerd. Talks has been going on. We'll ask ourselves whether there is any hope of reaching an agreement in these talks. What we'll cover in this video will include looking at where the Gerd is as far as its completion is concerned, issues that are contentious, the various treaties that have been quoted in this whole process, the treaties that were signed in the 19th century, all the way to the Cooperative Framework of Nile Basin Initiative. We'll also be looking at negotiations which have been going on between or among the three countries, tripartite talks, various parties that have probably influenced these talks, and various parties that have tried to bring the countries together, including United States, United Arab Emirates, African Union, and others. Also, we'll look at what the events which are going on in Sudan. I mean, how are they to influence these talks, and what Ethiopia should do as far as bargaining power is concerned. Since 2011, Ethiopia has been building one of the largest hydroelectric power dams, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Gerd. The project has now reached a significant milestone. On September 11, 2023, Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced the completion of the fourth and final water filling stage. The dam, which has been filled 4 times starting in 2020, according to Kifle Horo, the project manager of Gerd, has 42 billion cubic meters of water in its 74 billion cubic meter reservoir, and the overall completion now stands at 93%. Additionally, the dam stands at the height of 620 meters, only 25 meters left before it reaches the final height of 645 meters. According to Ethiopia Prime Minister, the journey to this milestone has not been easy. He talked of a challenging path, recognizing both the hardship and from within and also outside the country. The Prime Minister said that there has been numerous obstacles coming their way, but through their belief and determination, they have pushed through and arrived at this critical juncture where the project is now almost being complete and water has been filled to a level where power can be generated. While Ethiopians celebrate this achievement, it has not been without controversy in Egypt. The Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs protested, claiming that the water filling disregarded the interest and water security of downstream nations, and arguing that it was violating international law. Let's look at Nile treaties which have been quoted widely as far as the negotiations between or among the three countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, is concerned. The allocation and management of Nile waters has long been a contentious topic between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. Egypt's argument, based on the Nile treaties of 1959, 1929, and 1902, has been laying claim of the Nile waters and the allocation which had been done in those years, or in those agreements. The agreement of 1959 with Sudan has been quoted as the legal foundation for the Nile water allocation. This stance has faced strong opposition from Ethiopia and other upstream riparian states, arguing that they were not part of the treaty. The 1959 treaty, just like the one earlier in 1902, 1929, did not take into consideration the interest of the upstream. Nile countries, Ethiopia being one of them. Starting with the 1902 Nile Treaty, also known as the Anglo-Ethiopian Treaty. This was an agreement between Great Britain on behalf of Sudan, which was under British rule, and Ethiopia. It was signed on May 15, 1902 in Addis Ababa. The main purpose of this treaty was to determine the boundary between Ethiopia and Sudan, but it also included a provision on the use of Nile waters. The Article 3 of this treaty stated that Ethiopia would not construct or allow construction of any works across Blue Nile, Lake Tana, and also Sabot River that would arrest the flow of their waters into the Nile without the consent of Great Britain and the government of Sudan. The 1902 Nile Treaty has been controversial since it was signed. Ethiopia argues that the treaty was imposed on it by colonial power and therefore was not legally binding. Egypt, on the other hand, argues that the treaty is still valid and that Ethiopia is bound to respect its provisions. Another treaty that has been quoted widely is the 1929 Nile Waters Agreement. This was an agreement between Egypt and Great Britain, and this was on behalf of his colonies, Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, which was then known as Tanganyika. It was signed on May 7, 1929 in Cairo. The main purpose of this treaty was to determine the allocation of Nile waters between Egypt and Sudan. The Nile Treaty allocated Egypt 48 billion cubic meters of water per year and Sudan 4 billion cubic meters. The treaty also granted Egypt veto power over any construction projects on Nile River or its tributaries that could reduce the flow of water into Egypt. The 1929 Waters Agreement has been criticized for being unfair to the upstream riparian states of the Nile, such as Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, as well as Ethiopia. These states argue that the treaty gives Egypt and Sudan an undue share of the Nile waters, while they are the one who contribute most of the water to the river. The 1959 Nile Water Treaty also comes into play. This was an agreement between Egypt and Sudan. At this time, now British was out of the picture because both countries now have gained independence. But the other countries in the upstream have not gained independence yet. The 1959 treaty allocated water, the Nile waters, raising Egypt's share from 48 billion cubic meters to 55.5 billion cubic meters, while Sudan share was raised from 4 billion cubic meters to 18.5 billion cubic meters. The agreement also stipulated that in case of an increase in average water yield, the increased yield should be shared equally between two downstream riparian countries, that is Egypt and Sudan. There was no mention of other countries in this treaty. The 1909, 1902, 1929 and 1959 treaties have increasingly been challenged by the upstream riparian countries. In 2010, the upstream countries signed the Cooperative Framework Agreement of Nile Basin Initiative, which is a new agreement on the Nile that is intended to replace these treaties. However, Egypt and Sudan have refused to sign the Cooperative Framework Agreement, arguing that it gives these countries too much power and control over the Nile waters. The Nile Basin Initiative Cooperative Framework Agreement is a regional agreement between the 11 Nile Basin countries, which are Burundi, DRC, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. It was signed in 2010 in Entebbe, Uganda, but has not been ratified by all the members of the states, including two, Egypt and Sudan, which uh, are key players as far as the talks between or talks among these three countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, is concerned. The Nile Basin Initiative Cooperative Framework Agreement is based on the following principle. One is equitable and reasonable utilization of the Nile Basin water resource, no significant harm to other Nile Basin states, and protection and conservation of the Nile Basin ecosystem, as well as cooperation and joint action among the Nile Basin states. This framework has been praised for its emphasis on cooperation and sustainable development. However, it has also been criticized for being too weak and for lacking an enforcement mechanism. The upstream countries have also expressed concern that the framework may give Egypt and Sudan too much control over Nile waters. Now having looked at those three uh, frameworks, now you have an understanding on where the three countries are coming from as far as negotiation is concerned. Egypt is claiming that it has been allocated a significant amount of water, Nile River water. So is Sudan, but Ethiopia has been left out in all those treaties. Ethiopia, according to those treaties, is not supposed to utilize the Nile Basin waters because it has not been allocated in those treaties. CFA, the Cooperative Agreement Framework Agreement of Nile Basin Initiative, has now brought another perspective where this resource is supposed to be shared equitably. So that has been the position of Ethiopia, but the other two countries, Egypt and Sudan, since they have not ratified this framework, argue to the contrary. They are still stuck with 1959 treaty, which did not take into consideration the interest of the upstream countries. What has been the concerns of Egypt? Egypt has a number of concerns about the construction of the Gerd. This includes reduced water flow, where we know that Egypt relies on 90% waters. 90% of waters that is used in Egypt comes from River Nile. So this is a major source of water, and they have the feeling that Gerd has that potential to reduce the flow of water into Egypt, especially during the dry season. There are also concerns with flooding, where Egypt is concerned about the potential of flooding downstream of the Gerd. If the dam is not operated properly, it would release large volumes of water, and suddenly it can cause flooding in Egypt or in downstream countries. There is also the concern of siltation, where the Gerd could also trap sediment from the Nile River, which could reduce capacity of Egypt's dam and irrigation systems. There is also loss of control over the Nile. Egypt fears that the Gerd will give Ethiopia too much control over the Nile. Egypt currently has a veto power over any construction projects on the Nile and or its tributaries that could reduce flow of water into Egypt. The Gerd could weaken Egypt's position and make it more vulnerable to Ethiopian decisions about use of Nile. Egypt has also expressed concerns about lack of transparency in the construction of this dam. Ethiopia has been reluctant, as Egypt says, to share information about dams design and operation plans. This, according to Egypt, has made it difficult to assess the potential risk and impacts, although this is a position that has been disputed by Ethiopia. What is Ethiopia saying to justify the construction and the operation of Gerd? Ethiopia has a number of justifications on the construction of this dam. These include provision of energy. Ethiopia is referred to as a power deficient country. Only a small proportion of its population is covered or provided with electricity. So with construction of this dam, Ethiopia hopes to connect its population with electricity and also boost economic development and also provide a reliable and a clean source of energy. This will go a long way in boosting the economy of the country and also improving the lives of the people. There's also the question of water security, where Ethiopia is water-stressed country. They hope that God will help them manage their water resources more effectively and also improve water security. There is also the concern of flooding, where they hope that God will help control flooding of the Blue River Nile, which has caused significant damage to Ethiopian communities in the past. There is also the aspect of regional cooperation, where Ethiopia believes that the GAD can be a catalyst for regional cooperation and development. The dam will provide electricity and water to Ethiopia and its neighbors, and it will help reduce poverty and conflict in the region. Ethiopia has also emphasized that GAD is a sovereign project and that it has a right to develop its water resources. Ethiopia has stated that it is committed to working with Egypt and Sudan to reach an agreement on filling and operation of the dam. Let's now come to negotiations which has been happening for several years. Since 2014, the three countries have engaged in a series of tripartite talks in an attempt to find a solution to this issue. In 2015, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan signed the Declaration of Principles (DOP) on the GAD. The DOP, or the Declaration of Principles, is a framework agreement that outlines the principles and guidelines for the filling and operation of the GAD. The DOP includes the following principle. One is equitable and reasonable utilization of the Nile water resources. The other one is that no significant harm to other Nile basin states, and then cooperation and joint action among the Nile basin. So there are 10 points into this agreement, but these are the main ones. The DOP also establishes a number of institutions and mechanisms to support cooperation and dispute. These institutions include: one, there is a tripartite national committee, there is an independent scientific group, and then there is an international panel of experts. All these institutions have been very crucial in bringing these three countries together to hold negotiations and also bringing out different aspects. And following the debate that has been ongoing, you may find that some of these institutions have been very crucial, especially in influencing concerns that have been raised by various countries. Although the three countries signed this DOP, they failed to reach a final agreement on technical matter, namely the filling and operation of the dam. Although this framework outlines the principle and guidelines for filling and operation of the dam, it does not provide specific details on how the dam should be filled and operated. This has led to disagreement between the three countries, particularly on the issue of how quickly the dam should be filled, and also what would happen in the event of drought, of a prolonged drought. Egypt is concerned that if the dam is filled too quickly, it could reduce the flow of water into Egypt, especially during the dry season. Ethiopia, on the other hand, wants to fill the dam quickly in order to start generation of electricity as soon as possible. Ethiopia started generating electricity in February 2022. The three countries have been negotiating the filling and operation of the GAD for several years, but they have not been able to reach an agreement. This has led to a lot of tension and uncertainty. Some of the challenges that have prevented the three countries from reaching a final agreement may include the fact that the three countries have different priorities and interests. Egypt is concerned about the impact of the dam on its water, so is Sudan. Ethiopia is also primarily concerned about the benefits of the dam for its energy, development, and economic growth. Sudan is concerned about both impact of the dam on its water supply and the benefits of the dam for its energy, development, and economic growth. There is lack of trust between the three countries, which has made it difficult for each to reach an agreement on this dam. Egypt is concerned that Ethiopia will not act on its best interest when it comes to filling and operating of the dam. Ethiopia is concerned that Egypt will try to prevent it from filling and operating the dam as it sees fit. There are also complex issues. The filling and operation of the dam is a complex technical issue. There are a number of different factors that may need to be considered, such as hydrology of the Nile basin, the impact of the dam on downstream countries, and also the safety of the dam. Egypt has invoked Article number 10 of the DOP. This happened in 2019, where it blamed Addis Ababa for hindering the progress of the talks. This article states that if the three countries cannot resolve their disputes, mediation should be sought. Under the leadership of the former president of U.S. Donald Trump, the U.S. started or attempted to broker a tripartite discussion in the presence of a representative from the World Bank. However, this did not yield fruits and did not help in resolving this conflict. Ethiopia has expressed a preference for the involvement of the AU in the negotiation process, and in 2021, Dina Mufti, the then spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, emphasized that although Ethiopia generally opposes mediation by external parties, it welcomes AU assistance. This spokesman stated that the tripartite talks regarding the Gerd should be concluded between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt themselves without the need for mediators. Mediators, he said, should focus on facilitating the discussion rather than dictating the process of the parties involved. However, multiple AU-led attempts to break the deadlock over the dam in 2021 did not bear fruits, with Ethiopia accusing the two lower riparian countries, Egypt and Sudan, to have disrupted the process 9 times, undermining the genuine efforts of the African Union and blocking a productive discussion. Later, Ethiopia also rejected attempts made by Egypt and Sudan to seek the involvement of the United Nations Security Council over the Gerd issue. Then there into picture comes the League of Arab Nations. League of Arab States or nations took a stance against Ethiopia in its dispute with Egypt and Sudan over the Gerd. In a resolution that they passed in May 2023, this league expressed its support for Egypt and Sudan and called on Ethiopia to cease its unilateral actions on the Gerd. Ethiopia was to respond to this stance by accusing the organization of bias and interference on its internal affairs. Ethiopia also stated that it will continue to fill and operate the dam in accordance with its own plans. Ethiopia condemned the resolution as an affront to the African Union and its members and said that it runs contrary to the cherished shared history of people of Africa and the Arab world. Ethiopia accused the League of Arab Nations of misusing its platform to promote the interests of a single member of state, that is Egypt, and said that the resolution was based on false and misleading information. Ethiopia also stated that the resolution was unhelpful and would only serve to further complicate the Gerd negotiations. Ethiopia reiterated its commitment to the African Union-led process for resolving Gerd disputes and said that it would continue to engage with Egypt and Sudan in good faith. Although the League of Arab Nations resolution is not binding on Ethiopia, it reflected support of the Arab world for Egypt and Sudan, and these had some implications. Then into picture comes the United Arab Emirates, which attempted to bring the parties together. This is a new player, and UAE seemed to have emerged in the scene, stepping into this process. On 27th August 2023, the Ethiopian Federal Government Communication Service indicated that the talks held in UAE capital Abu Dhabi had collapsed after it reached a stage to draft an agreement. The UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs, who has been described as a person who attaches great importance to the stability of the Horn of Africa and the well-being of its people, emphasized that a successful conclusion of negotiations of the Gerd was within reach. Unfortunately, his wish for a successful conclusion did not come true, as Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan had concluded 2 days of tripartite negotiations held in Cairo in July. These ended with no significant progress. The negotiations were set to continue in Addis Ababa in September following that meeting between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt in Cairo. This happened in July 12th, where they agreed to finalize these guard filling rules of operations agreement within 4 months. There are doubts that the meetings will be able to yield any significant results. The experts have highlighted that the issues surrounding the Nile are beyond Egypt's positions on water usage. They encompass governmental legitimacy, cultural identity, economic interests, and broader regional political influence. Further, they also underline the vital role of Egypt's internal politics, implying that a speedy solution may not be realistic. Ethiopia has repeatedly accused Egypt over the tendency to stick to the status quo of the colonial-era agreements under the name of reaching binding agreement through international law. Ethiopia's experts say that Egypt long sought binding agreement on operation of the dam and other legal issues, including how the water will be released downstream during the prolonged drought, and how the three countries will solve any future dispute, is just unacceptable, as it restricts Ethiopia from entering using the Nile waters during the drought. The experts have explained that through the binding agreement, Egypt seeks to limit any future use of Nile waters by Ethiopia, including for irrigation purposes. They argue that Ethiopia had already taken Egypt's interests into account in the previous negotiation proposals, and say there is no need for further compromise with regard to binding agreement. Seleshi Bekele, the Ethiopian ambassador to United States and the head of Ethiopian negotiation team with the rank of a minister, recently told the press that the push from negotiators of the downstream countries, particularly Egypt, to bind Ethiopia from possible future developments of the river is against national interest of Ethiopia. Seleshi reiterated that Ethiopia has that natural and legal right to utilize the Nile waters fairly and equitably without causing significant harm to the downstream, which is the spirit of Nile Basin CFA initiative and also the spirit of the Declaration of Principles. The major point of contention in the negotiation process, according to Seleshi, has been drought mitigation, and he said that they are being careful not to slide into determining water shares, as the drought mitigation negotiations involves numbers. He added that the agreement must not bring foreclosure to future development projects on the Nile. Nevertheless, the ambassador said significant progress has been made during the initial 2-day negotiations phase in Cairo, and highlighted that the team successfully introduced revisions and fresh perspective to 9 out of the 16 articles outlined in the negotiations framework. He stated that the upcoming session will prioritize refining the remaining 7 articles. The ultimate goal is to reach a consensus that aligns with the aspiration of all participants in the discussions. However, the negotiations table has become increasingly unstable, largely due to Sudan's inconsistency position on the Gerd, especially in the recent times. Initially, Sudan supported Ethiopia's stance on the issue, but this changed after the ousting of the former Sudanese leader Omar al-Bashir in response to a popular uprising. Since 2021, Sudan's rhetoric during negotiations has shifted from a welcoming attitude to one of suspicion and hostility. In 2021, Ethiopia said the question of the dam safety and the information exchange that were raised by the Sudanese side have been adequately addressed, and they could not be reason for complaint at all. In January 2023, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed visited Sudan, marking the first visit since the military coup by al-Burhani in 2021. During this one-day visit, al-Burhani emphasized the alignment and agreement between Sudan and Ethiopia on all matters related to Gerd. Nevertheless, Cairo and Khartoum have been strengthening their military collaboration as seen in the signing of the Comprehensive Military Cooperation Agreement in March 2021. This agreement focused on areas such as training and border security. Commentators have highlighted the significant influence of Egypt on the political landscape of Sudan. Egyptians have played a prominent role as key players in the Sudanese politics, a phenomenon observed not only in the present but also throughout history. Various reports also suggest that Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has consistently expressed support for Sudan's army and pro-army political parties, actively working to enhance relations between the two nations. However, the dynamics have been altered by civil war that erupted in April 2023 between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces. Analysts indicate that this conflict involving neighboring countries and the influential nations directly and indirectly makes it challenging to anticipate which side will gain the upper hand in the Gerd talks. With some fearing that tables might turn, commentators who support Ethiopia's stance emphasize the importance of Ethiopia closely monitoring the situation and adjusting to its approach accordingly. It has been observed that if Ethiopia fails to do so, Egypt could potentially dominate the negotiations process by leveraging its significant influence in Sudan, ultimately playing a vital role in shaping Sudan's foreign policy. It is inevitable that the outcome of the civil war will influence Sudan's stance on the Gerd. In addition to the outcome of the civil war in Sudan, Ethiopia's current political and security issues could also strengthen Egypt's influence in the region. There is emphasis that there is necessity for Ethiopia improving its strained relations with the Western world, pointing out that its bargaining power in the international politics and diplomacy has declined. In summary, we can say that the completion of the Gerd has marked a significant milestone in Ethiopia's ambition to be a hydroelectric power giant. However, it has sparked a long-standing dispute with the downstream Egypt and Sudan due to concerns over reduced water flow, flooding, siltation, and perceived loss of control over Nile. The historical context of the Nile water allocation with the colonial-era treaties favoring Egypt further complicates the negotiations. Despite years of tripartite talks and external mediation attempts, a final agreement remains elusive, primarily due to differing priorities, technical complexities, among other issues. Sudan's shifting stance on the issue has further added to the complexity of the situation. In conclusion, we can say that the Gerd and the ongoing negotiations underscore the complexity of managing shared water resources and the challenges of reconciling the interests of the countries along the Nile River. The involvement of external parties has also not led to a resolution, and the situation remains uncertain, with potential implications for the region's stability and diplomatic relations. The issue continues to be a point of contention and test of diplomatic skill and cooperation between the nations involved. So we'll be looking to see what transpires as far as these talks are concerned, whether they are going to yield fruits or what will transpire given the dynamics of these talks. So thank you for reaching this far. If it's your first time here, please subscribe to this channel. You can watch other videos that we have made on this big project in Ethiopia and other related topics that focus more on Africa. So thank you.